What is up, Ravens flock? Huge shout out for your support for the 410 Sports Talk. Chance and Glenn are the best in the business. They're killing it right now. They love talking Raven talk. Make sure you go subscribe to their channel. Let's go Ravens. Big trust.
Any further ado, we'd like to introduce the managing editor over at the Dolphins Wire, Mike Masala. Mike, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
What's up,
welcome
man?
to the show.
What's going on, gentlemen? How we doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you guys having me on. It's going to be an exciting week, and man, this game's get the energy going. I'm telling you.
Absolutely. It's definitely going to be really interesting to see the new and not so new Dolphins, in the way that they're playing, but certainly they haven't at least a new head coach. It's the game opener here at M&T Bank Stadium. Of course, a little bit of a revenge tour potentially for the Baltimore Ravens. So like you said, a lot of reasons to get excited about this game. Can't wait to get into it. Glenn, what you got?
All right, Mike, I got to start with the top, okay? I got to start with the new head coach. Mike McDaniel comes over from the San Francisco 49ers, another member of the Shanahan tree. Now his son is now creating branches off of his own tree. But what I found interesting is when I was looking into the coaching staff, I don't know how often this happens. I'm sure it's happened before, but it's got to be quite rare. Why did Coach McDaniel ultimately decide to keep the defensive coordinator still in place here and not go with his own coaches, which we commonly see when coaches get a new job?
Yeah, I think we saw last year the defense down the stretch ended up being one of the better defenses in the league. Through the first half of the season, they struggled, as did the entire team. They went on that 7-game losing streak. The back half, they really turned it on. And some people have said that was Brian Flores is doing, getting a little bit more involved in the defense. Everything that's been said publicly has been that Josh Boyer had his hands all over that defense and that they haven't really changed a whole lot in what they're doing this year. So I think it was looking at that system and the way you have things going. You want to have continuation. You don't want to start over with a guy who might be coming in, changing the system around a little bit, putting guys in positions that they're maybe not as successful as they were the second half of last season. So you keep Josh Boyer. You kept a lot of your defensive players from this past year. They re-signed almost everybody who was a free agent on the defense this offseason. So you keep them all around. You readjust Xavier Howard. You bring back Emmanuel Ogbah. They're in a great position right now. And I think Josh Boyer being there, although they played a not so great offense up there in New England this past week, this could be a really good defense going through this whole year with Josh Boyer in there.
Yeah, it sounds like if I'm not mistaken, I think that you have some history in New England there, Mike. And so were those shots fired at the not so good offense, New England?
I grew up in New England. I watched them for the last 27 years of my life, and it does not look anything like what I watched growing up, and it is very scary. Matt Patricia and Joe Judge and whatever Bill Belichick is deciding to do up there, I think it's the wrong move. So and we saw how that played out this past weekend. I think they're a team heading in the wrong direction right now.
You hear that,
yeah,
well,
we won't.
Yeah,
we won't start that conversation because Glenn.
For years, I've been saying that Belichick is a fraud and it's all Tom Brady.
I think fraud's a little strong. So
he's a
let's
fraud, Jimbo.
Let's keep going. I think fraud's a little strong.
All right.
But,
I was alone in that boat, and now I'm starting to get some people to come onto that boat with me after years of being. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Belichick.
So this is the one of the questions from one of our folks here at 410 Sports Talk. Todd Heap says, and this is a question to you, Mike. Would you describe the Dolphins cover zero as a gimmick or a smart defensive strategy? If the latter, why has it been limited to the Dolphins so far?
I think it depends on your playmakers, really. And the Dolphins have a great front and a great secondary. Like, there are talented players all over this defense right now. You look at the front seven, you have Jalen Phillips, who's a first-round pick last year. You brought in Melvin Ingram this offseason, Christian Wilkins, Emmanuel Ogbah, who we talked about already. And then the secondary, Xavier Howard is, in my mind, top 3, top 4 cornerbacks in the league right now. And then you look at Byron Jones on the other side. He might not be putting up the interception numbers that you'd expect from a top cornerback, but he's a very solid number 2. Javon Holland, who came in last year, has rose up to a captain in 1 year. So I think it's a smart play that they're doing right now, but it's obviously not something you can do every week. It depends on the team you're playing against as well.
Yeah.
So the skill that they have there, and then the teams that they're doing it against. If you're going against Patrick Mahomes torn apart, like that's probably what's going to happen. But if you go against some of these other teams who are quarterbacks who are a little bit less experienced, or who are apt to make turnovers or costly mistakes, those are good positions you're putting yourself in. So I think you might start to see that around the league more and more, but you're going to have a defense you really trust in the secondary and in the front seven to both do their job simultaneously.
Yeah, I think that's key. Like you said, I think it really comes down to personnel. But this is a question I got to ask, Mike. All right, we here in Baltimore and in Maryland, we only see from a distance all the storylines around Tua, right? So we hear that people like him, people don't like what is it that Miami, how do they feel about Tua, right? Like, are they sold on the kid? Is this a 1-year deal and then they're going to try and tamper with Lamar Jackson? Like, what's the situation?
Yeah, I mean, publicly, everybody has been super positive about Tua Tagovailoa. Mike McDaniel in his introductory video and press conference, and every press conference he's done since then, has spoken nothing but glowing words about him. His Tyreek Hill is saying he's the most accurate quarterback he's ever seen or played with. But you also have Stephen Ross in ownership, who has been meddling around with Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson in the past. So he's not totally sold on him. So I think this is really a 1-year trial period, and that's what everybody has talked about this whole offseason and heading into the season. Tua needs to take that step, and if he doesn't with all of these weapons, then you move on. You find another quarterback, and they were in a better spot to do that at the beginning of the offseason before they got another draft pick taken away. But they still have the opportunity to do that heading into the next season. So this is a real chance for Tua to go out and prove himself. And I think the coaching staff believes in him right now, but if you go through another season and he's making some head scratching plays or not putting up the numbers that you'd expect with an offense that's been improved and an offensive system that really benefits quarterbacks and an offensive line that's been improved as well, then you move on. Because this is a quarterback-driven league, and if you don't have the guy, it's so hard to win in this league. It's so hard to come away with the Lombardi at the end of the year.
Yeah, Glenn, I got to follow that up real quick, because I could be totally wrong about Tua, but I felt like in college he did a pretty good job at being aggressive and pushing the ball down the field in a vertical fashion. I could be wrong. I could be misremembering that, to be completely honest, but I feel like now, is it like, what has it solely been coaching, like holding him back from doing that? It's almost like, we're familiar here with Tyrod Taylor, and he has this inability to push the ball down the field. Like, he is so hesitant to do it, he won't do it. And I see some of that when I watch Tua from afar, but I don't know if that's coaching or is that actually like his nature. Do you see what I'm saying?
It's probably a little bit of both. So before this year, when their offensive, they've had 4 offensive coordinators now since Tua's been there in 3 years. It's really hard to establish yourself and get familiar with a system when you're constantly changing it. And then you also look around, and before last year, Devontae Parker was his best wide receiver, who last year was like last in the league in yards in separation. So you're not going to be able to get the ball downfield if your guy's running stride for stride with somebody. And yes, that's a guy who can win jump balls, but you're not taking that shot every time. So I think now that you're in a position with Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki, Tyreek Hill, you have 2 good, solid running backs out of the backfield. And I think also you didn't have time to develop. Last year they had Jesse Davis and Liam Eichenberg on the offensive line playing their tackle positions. And they were, I believe, the 82nd and 84th tackles rated by Pro Football Focus.
That's
and I'm
good.
not a huge PFF guy, but that, yeah, like you said, not the best, not the best going on there. So you shore up the offensive line, you bring on Teron Armstead. who is injured right now, and so is Austin Jackson, who has missed practice the last 2 days. So you guys could be getting the last year's version of the offensive line, which would be great for you guys. Let me tell you, it would be, you guys would feast. Justin Houston would go crazy. It's yeah, I think it's a lot of what the personnel that they have, and that was really holding them back at the time.
Well, let's get into that health because, Terron Armstead, I mean, Tyreek Hill stole the headlines in the offseason, but, I mean, Terron Armstead's an absolute monster at left tackle, and to bring a guy in that's, he's a game changer. And so I know he's got the toe issue, but I also saw he did get in a limited session in practice today. So what's the overall, what's his health and what's the overall health of the team heading into this game?
Yeah, there are a lot of questions, specifically with Armstead. He left, I believe it was in the third quarter of last week's game. He was out for the remainder of the series, and he came back in. Mike McDaniel has said that Armstead has played through injuries in the past, and he expects him to probably do the same again this week. So I would not be surprised to see him play. But the Austin Jackson injury at the right tackle. Now, Austin Jackson was their first round pick a few years back, and he has not worked out at any position that they've put him. They put him at left tackle. They put him at left guard. Right tackle in this new zone blocking scheme is supposed to fit him better, quote unquote, with the air quotes right now. Austin Jackson, his injury, putting in Greg Little up there instead, it could be really hurtful. And Greg Little, while he's been a full participant this week, he's also been dealing with an ankle injury. And you start to get down there and you're wondering, how is somebody going to protect the backside of Tua Tagovailoa, who is a left-handed quarterback? This is going to be a significant issue if they can't get the same guys on the field consistently. So those are really their biggest things health-wise. Obviously, Byron Jones is still on the PUP, so they won't have him this week. You'll be dealing with Nick Needham on the other side, like you did last week. Brandon Jones popped up on the injury report, and so did Christian Wilkins today. So those are also some concerning issues. But the biggest one I think right now is Jackson at right tackle.
Oh, man, I tell you what, Justin Houston had a lot of fun with players that lacked some serious experience against the Jets. So we might, like you talked about, Mike, we might be in for a little bit of the same. But let's move off Tua, and I want to ask about, Glenn mentioned him, the big acquisition of Tyreek Hill. How do you feel like that has, I mean, we saw him, he had I think he had almost 100 yards in that first game, a little under. He had 5 or 6 receptions. 8 receptions?
Yep.
Oh, geez whiz. All right, I'm
12 targets.
Right. So he's definitely getting a lot of work. What's it been like in 2 ways? I'm curious to know what he's brought like off the field as far as mentality and, coming from a team like the Chiefs and stuff like that, winning organization, and then also on the field, right? Like how has that helped the team?
Yeah, so last week was really the first full time we've gotten to see Tyreek Hill play. They played for a couple drives in the final preseason game, but having him on the field along with Jalen Waddle, it really opened up the offense. So talking on the field strictly, Tyreek Hill does so many things for this offense. It takes away pressure from a guy like Jalen Waddle, who was him and Mike Gesicki were their 2 top targets last year. So if you start opening things up, if you start taking the cover off the defense, you have to start showing that you can hit those deep shots consistently, but you're going to draw extra help. And that opens up so many things. It also allows your running game to work more effectively. And he's one of the most dynamic players in the league. Speed-wise, you get the ball in his hands at the line of scrimmage on a slant. You saw what Jalen Waddle did last week on a slant route. Crazy. On 4th and 7. Blazing
Crazy.
Speed.
How many people make that play in the whole league?
Maybe 2 of them, and they might be in Miami.
On the same team.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty crazy. Off the field, he's done a lot to support his quarterback. He's been pumping up Tua every single chance he gets. Again, we talked about the most accurate quarterback thing. Probably a little bit of an overstatement, but he's been, from what everybody else has said, from the coach to the players, that he is showing up every day like he is trying to earn a roster spot. And obviously he's not. He's making $30 million a year. He's made 6 straight Pro Bowls to start his career. He's one of the best wide receivers in the league. He doesn't need to do that, but he's going out and showing everybody, hey, this is how we work. This is how you become a championship team, because this is what he did in Kansas City to help him get there. And if you can instill that work ethic in Jalen Waddle and Cedric Wilson, and Mike Gesicki's working on some new things, trying to become a better blocking tight end. If you get these guys to practice and play with this intensity, the sky could be the limit. Obviously, it all comes back down to what your quarterback can do in this system, but that work ethic will pay dividends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no doubt. It takes a different type of work ethic if you want to be a champion. But you touched on it briefly, and I want to circle back. Mike Gesicki was such an integral part of their offense last year. How does
And
he
my
come
fantasy
out?
team.
Yeah, and so how does he come out of that game with just one target, one catch for just 1 yard? I mean, what is this something that Mike Gesicki is going to have to get used to, or is this an aberration?
Yeah, this was the big question this offseason. They decided to bring him back on the franchise tag. There were some questions on whether they were going to franchise tag him and trade him, keep him around, sign him to a long-term deal. They ended up going with the franchise tag route. And once you have Mike McDaniel in here, I mean, you guys saw what Kyle Shanahan did in Tennessee and in San Francisco, making George Kittle one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. And he wasn't necessarily a top blocking tight end when he came out. He was solid, don't get me wrong, but he took a real big step in San Francisco. And when Mike Gesicki is in that offense, he's not an inline tight end. He didn't do that really at all when under Brian Flores. He is a big slot receiver. He can play outside. He has had to adjust this offseason, and that's been something they've really challenged him on, watching a lot of George Kittle tape and really getting him to learn that inline tight end role. They brought over John Embry, who was the tight ends coach from San Francisco, to help teach him that. And he's really, you can tell he's working at it, but we haven't seen huge benefits. I believe I saw a stat that was they ran the ball 5 times while he was on the field on this past Sunday for 0 yards.
Ooh.
So anytime you have him in line, it's not working out very well. And you have Durham Smythe, who's at least a somewhat capable blocker. He's not George Kittle by any means, but he can get the job done. And he's out snapping Mike Gesicki right now. So wow. There's a real big question where he's going to fit. Do you start to just line him up as a wide receiver, let him do his thing? Or again, this is another 1-year trial. And I think it was smart the way that they did it. Bring him back, see what he can do. Maybe you end up moving him by the middle of the season if he can't figure things out. But Mike Gesicki's future in Miami is certainly up in the air.
Wow. Interesting. Glenn, you're absolutely right, because he such a big part of that team.
Touchdown machine.
Absolutely. So one of the questions I had, let's take a macro perspective of this game for a second, take a step out of like individual matchups. And what I want to get from you is really, this is the Dolphins' first test away with the new coaching staff here in Baltimore. John Harbaugh, I think, does a pretty good job against younger coaches, historically speaking, that are younger as in like time in a head coaching position. So what are the keys here for the Dolphins to come up to Baltimore and get out with a W?
Yeah, I think protecting Tua obviously is the number one thing right now. And I think your defense needs to get after Lamar Jackson. You were able to do a lot of things last year in a game where Tua did not start, and you were able to come out with a win. I think you need to attack them in similar ways. Xavier Howard today said that Baltimore is probably expecting Miami to come out and play the same way, that they're probably going to try to do a few things a little bit differently. And that's the NFL gamesmanship. But you need to protect Tua. You need to give him time. You need to allow him to make your plays, make your throws. If it's taking a deep shot every once in a while, if it's holding your block and getting to the outside to allow your running back to hit the hole, their offensive line with the injuries right now is a huge question. And then, like I said, defensively, the turnovers is what's been really key for this defense over the last year. They won the turnover battle last week 3-0. Xavier Howard's one of the top interception getters. He is the top interception getter since entering the NFL. You have so many guys. You can get after Lamar Jackson. If you can contain him and protect Tua, I think those are two keys to winning this game. And there's a chance they can do it. I know you guys were talking a little bit before I got on about your tackle situation, and it's probably just as uncomfortable as ours right now.
So
that's why those guys get paid so much, man. They're just dime a dozen, then they don't stay healthy a lot of times.
There's not a lot of them out there. That's you lose your one, and it's just like every team, they're just scrambling to try and find anyone who can be serviceable. But man, it's frustrating. All right, so what's your prediction? I mean, what do you think ultimately takes place in Baltimore on Sunday?
I do think it's going to be a close game. I don't see this being a blowout for either side. Maybe last week's game for both teams weren't blowouts, but they were decisive victories. I don't know if that's going to be happening this week. I see like a 1-score game. I want to do it. I want to say it's going to be Miami. I do think Baltimore ends up winning this one. I don't know what it is specifically. I think Lamar Jackson is one of the more dynamic players in the league. We talked about that same dynasty with Tyreek Hill. This is a different type of guy. And yes, you were able to shut him down the first time. You don't have Byron Jones. You're going into a situation where your defense is still strong. You're playing a good coach as well. So can you really overcome that? I would like to say yes, but I think Baltimore will win in a very close game.
All right, we'll take any W we can get. I think it's going to be a really exciting game, Mike. I know that you think the same. Why don't you let the folks here know where they can find all the stuff you're working on?
Yeah, on Twitter at Mike_Masala, you can find me there. DolphinsWire.usatoday.com, or if you can just type in Dolphins Wire, you can find all the stuff that I do. Jason, who's one of our other writers, you can find his stuff on there as well. I do a podcast from time to time at Moving the Posts. You can find that on Twitter with all the links on there. I really appreciate you guys having me on. This was a blast. I would love to do this again someday.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah. Thanks so much, Mike. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
Talk to you later, Mike.
Right. Have a good one.
Yesterday does not matter. You're looking forward to today.
I'm looking forward to being a Raven.
What are they getting?
Everything out of me. They're going to get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that.